And I've seen how valuable it is, because now I've worked with, yes, the Dalai Lama, but also with CEOs of big companies around the world, and in law and business settings, and in schools like Stanford and Berkeley and Harvard and so forth. And people say, well, all right, how practical is this really? So I want to show in a moment a video of a conversation with a good friend, Bill Ford, who at that time was the CEO of Ford Motors, now the chairman. And he was having a really difficult time in the economic meltdown when he said, I'm about to lose my company and the industry on my watch. What do I do? So let's see this video, please. So let's talk about business for a moment, because business is driven by bottom line. Whether it's big corporations or startups, people are still looking for their funders and then how to, create a business plan that's successful. And in a big company like yours, there's a lot of metrics, but there's the online metrics too. You're watching to see who's clicking on your site and all of that. And those they can easily take over as the decision-making points. What is it going to do to our metrics? What's it going to do to our bottom line? How do you apply mindfulness or wisdom within a business culture?
That was one of the very first questions that I asked you all those years ago was, see, I remember what he told me. He doesn't remember his answers, but I remember them. But
it's great.
You did. I asked you that. I said, how can one have humanity in a place that's all driven by metrics? And I worked for bosses that I thought that's all they were metrics, literally, because all they talked about is all they cared about. And I thought, boy, if that's my future, forget it. And I'll never forget, some of the CEOs, and it's not just CEOs, some of the higher-ranking executives that I saw over my lifetime. I was very lucky to have grown up with the Ford Motor Company, and so I saw all the top people from the time literally I was born, not just from when I joined the company. And I saw so many of them lose their humanity along the way. It really was terrifying to me. I'll never forget my very first meeting I was in. We were in the middle of a subject with a senior executive, and I had just joined the company, and the meeting ended, and sort of in mid-sentence, and I said to somebody, what just happened? And they said, oh, he finished his cigar. When he finishes his cigar, the meeting's ends. I thought, you've got to be kidding me. And then we had a CEO who thought it was a sign of weakness if you went to the bathroom. And so if you were an executive, you had to sit in 8-hour meetings, and I thought, this is just sheer madness. We had another one who said to me later on, you think you'd like to be CEO? Let me show you my calendar. And he laid it out, and he said, if you want to have lunch with me, it would have to be 3 years out. I don't have a single lunch or dinner or breakfast free between now and then. And and that's when I started calling you frantically saying, look, I think at the end of the day, metrics are always important in a business, and they have to be, because you have to be able to measure success. But I also think you can model humanity in a way that people can pick up on. I mean, I think that the nature in corporations are that, people will mimic what they see above them in terms of the hierarchy. And whether that's a good or bad thing, it's a reality. And I've come to realize that over the years. And so, when I choose, the next generation of leaders, to me, behaviors is, certainly equally important and never less important than skill and ability, because I've seen a lot of really skilled, metric-driven executives make just and Ariana talked about that this morning. Some of the brightest people in the world make some of the worst decisions, and I think it's because they've completely lost touch or shut out humanity.
Thank you, Bill. Now, when I was living as a Buddhist monk years ago in the forest monasteries, I never imagined speaking to a crowd like this. or that there would be this widespread interest in mindfulness and compassion and so forth. And I'd gone to an Ivy League college, and I realized that it only gave me half of the education that I needed. And this really piggybacks on what you were saying, Donna. It didn't teach me how to deal with the suffering in my family. I had a brilliant scientist father who was also violent and abusive and a wife batterer. It didn't teach me how to deal with the trauma. It didn't teach me how to deal with my own emotions, my own anger, how to deal with conflict. It didn't teach me how to stay true to myself or listen to myself, or how to make a love relationship, or how to love others. All those things were absent in some way from the so-called best education that the West has to offer. And so I needed to learn those things that are now validated by 2 or 3 decades of neuroscience research and 4,000 papers that have been studied, that I learned by going into the Buddhist monastery and doing the very trainings that we're speaking about today, that don't require to be a Buddhist or go to a monastery. That it's really clear that no amount of technological development, no amount of nanotechnology, biotechnology, extension of internet and connectivity and networks and so forth is going to stop continuing warfare, stop continuing racism, stop continuing environmental destruction and tribalism. That the outer developments that we in the technological world and in the modern world are seeing change our lives so much have to be met by the developments of inner capacity, or we will destroy ourselves in some way or other or suffer enormously. And so the notion that the outer development and the outer connection that we make with one another now has to be paired with humanity's inner development. And I remember there was the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who at one point said, we're a nation of nuclear giants and ethical infants. And if we don't pair the development of connection and interbeing, interconnection, with interdependence and compassion with the tools that we have, we're on the road to greater and greater unhappiness.